Door Church family. My name is Julia O'Kelly, and I'm here to share a message that I think really speaks to my heart and should speak to some of your hearts. November is the National Child Adoption Month, so I want to talk to you all about a little bit about our story of forgiveness and grace through our adoption process. My story started not unlike a lot of you that have shared your stories this year. I grew up in a middle-class family and lived a pretty charming life as a young girl. My family started attending church regularly when I was in 5th grade, and that's where my faith journey began. I'm going to skip the rest of the story in the middle and go to 2010. This is the year that I actually met my husband, Sean McEwen. Sean and I quickly fell in love, and we were married in 2011. Sean was 40 and I was 38 at this time. We knew we really wanted to have children, so given our ages, we started right away. We tried for a year with no results and lost lots of disappointment. My doctor recommended that we get some testing done to see if there was something medically wrong with us. The test proved inconclusive, so we continued to try with no avail. One of the things that Sean and I decided was that if we couldn't have children naturally, we wouldn't put ourselves through costly, painful procedures, and we would be okay with whatever path God chose for us. A few years into the process, we decided parenthood through me giving birth was not going to happen, and we accepted this as God's plan. My mom used to always say to us as kids, she quoted Jeremiah 29:11 through 13, and this was the verse that kind of held true for us this season. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. We felt at peace with our decision to stop trying and knew that God had a really good plan for us. We decided to pursue foster and adoption as our next option. At the time, we lived in Arizona, so we decided to take the classes there, and the day that we got our certification, I got notified that I had a job offer in Kansas City. We decided moving was the direction that we wanted to take our family, and we left. Hey, what harm could it do to have to take the adoption foster classes in 2 states? A lot of paperwork. So we started taking the adoption class in Kansas again. God had a plan for us, and we quickly realized what was in store for our future. In 2015, we found out that my sister, who had 2 children, was neglecting them and possibly addicted to drugs. To say her life up until this point was tumultuous is an understatement. My sister has been troubled and in trouble most of her life, and now she was about to be homeless. She reached out to my parents and asked if they could take care of the children until she could find a place to live. Of course, they agreed. At the time, Jaden was 5 and Chloe was 3. My folks suspected that she was putting the children in danger just from the small things the kids would munch on when they'd come to visit. And then they got a call from the landlord informing them that she suspected my sister was leaving the kids at night to go and get high. Those accusations were confirmed, and my parents decided that it was best interest of the children to have my sister investigated for child neglect. It took 1 day for CPS to remove rights from the children from my sister and granted my parents guardianship. She tested positive for methamphetamines and was living in her car at the time. For those of you who don't know, the goal of CPS is reunification wherever possible, and the process takes some time to work through. I was lucky in that my job was headquartered in Minnesota, where they all lived at the time, and I could travel frequently to help my parents with the children. I attended court cases, and I tried to help my sister wherever possible, but she was lost in the world of drugs, and now blaming all of us and for her children being removed from her custody. Eventually, the caseworker in court decided that she was not going to do the work needed for the children to return to her care. They looked to Sean and I as the permanent placement. I can remember every single detail of that day in court, as if it was just yesterday. She didn't show up, and we were trying to call her and ask her where she was. The lawyer even got the judge to wait an extra hour to see if she would ever show up, and she didn't. I remember sitting in the courtroom listening to the judge permanently revoke her parental rights, and I felt so sick and disheartened for her and the children. I started weeping for her loss and the children's loss of their mother. Something they teach you when you go through classes that no matter how bad the parent is, the children have a natural bond with their mother, and the loss can have profound and lasting impacts that drastically shape their lives. I didn't want that for Jaden and Chloe. I can also say that I felt a huge sense of guilt, that these children are going to become a permanent part of my home and family. And while it gave me joy to think of extending my family with these wonderful children that I already knew and loved, it also felt wrong to feel that way when my sister now had nothing. As Sean and I brought the children home, little did we know the profound impact this would have on our lives and the struggles we would face as a family. Actually, to be honest with you, we didn't have a darn clue. Jaden and Chloe had spent summers with us up until this point when we were given guardianship. Our time with them was fun and joyful. As we planned new adventures every day, we were the fun auntie and uncle. And now we were in the role that had to be the parents that enforced the rules. This did not go over well with the children. That, coupled with the fact that Sean and I have extremely different parenting techniques, created a lot of strife in our household. It didn't take long for us to realize that the picture-perfect image of our family that we imagined in our minds actually was somewhat of a nightmare in reality. We started hearing a recount of what the children experienced before they went to live with my parents. They were physically and emotionally neglected. At one point in time, there were up to 12 people living in that house, a small three-bedroom apartment, displacing them from the rooms and using drugs and alcohol in front of them. My sister would leave them alone, sleeping on the couch, and use the TV as a babysitter. And they would wake up with random strangers in their house or all alone and very frightened. This trauma that they experienced led to out-of-control behaviors and extreme fear that we were unprepared to handle. The children didn't know basics such as eating with utensils, and their hygiene habits were sorely lacking. While my parents tried to intervene while they had them, they were overwhelmed and were struggling to just get by as we were now doing. It wasn't very long before I personally began to check out of life and just numbly fumbled around to get everyone through another day. My solid relationship with my husband started to crumble around me, and my faith became just something that was another chore for me to try to get through for the week. Faith had always been the rock in my life and my marriage, and the worst part of what we were going through is the children were taught by my sister that to hate the Christian religion and refuse to go to church if they were asked to. It was hard for me to fathom, as we were brought up as Christians in a home of amazing examples through my parents on how to follow Jesus. I couldn't understand how she got to this place. And then this verse from 1 Peter 5:8-9 began to resonate in me as I tried to process how this was happening. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout this world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. After living like this for what seemed like an eternity, but was actually only several months, we knew we needed help. I remember sitting in church one day and someone came up to me and told me how wonderful I was for taking these children, and this is something that I often heard from people. I smiled and nodded politely, but inside I was screaming for her to stop saying that. I wasn't a good mom or wife, and I was barely holding on to my sanity. I tried to keep up a strong front, but on the inside I was a hopeless mess. I wish people would quit telling me how wonderful I was when at times I hated my life, and I wish things could go back to how they were before we got the children. Hearing myself admit this to you all makes me cringe now, but it was the truth then. We found a support group that we attended with some of our best friends that also adopted. That focused on kids with trauma. It turns out everyone in the group felt the same way we did about their foster adopt kids, and we started the process of understanding and healing. You see, children that have suffered trauma that these children face have developed what they call trauma brain, which leads them to live in their reptilian part of their brains, ruled by instinct and reaction. The healthy part of the brain that needs nurturing and development at a young age is very underdeveloped. The phenomena that happens is actually as the adoptive parents We also get trauma brain as we go through this process. Going through this training was a beginning to the healing of our family and started our journey out of the trauma brain and into a state of healing as a family. It was at this time that I started to refocus on my faith and hold on to the word and the truth that God had in his word. 2 Corinthians 12, 8 through 10 says, 3 times I pleaded to the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest in me. That is why, for Christ's sakes, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, persecutions, in difficulties, and when I am weak, then I am strong. Sean and I decided that we wanted to send the children to Christian school to help them in the biblical truth. Another obstacle that we faced is that Jaden has autism, and we were not able to find a school that would take him with this type of a disability. This is when we found Open Door Christian School, and both children were welcomed with open arms. I can't begin to tell you how profound of an impact that this church and school has had on my children. Both kids flourish in their faith and in their academics going to this school, and now have been welcomed to Kansas City Christian School with the same success. I wish that I could say that we now have my picture-perfect life, but as I have learned, that is never going to exist because we are all imperfect people. I can say that by the grace of God and those he sent to intervene on his behalf, we have continued to grow as a family, and our relationship with each other have become healthier and happier. I once told somebody through this process that this was not the life I dreamed of. And God scolded me audibly on the spot, and I heard him actually say to me, this is the life I have given you. Get over yourself and learn to enjoy and appreciate what you have. It was eye-opening. I learned through this process that I have to give myself and all those around me grace. Parenting is hard. Everyone fails at times, but that's how you learn to become a better version of yourself. An amazing new friend of mine wrote this Bible study on Philippians 4, 4 through 9, and she calls it the peace equation, which is something that I remind myself of often. Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer, petition, and thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts, your minds, in Jesus Christ. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Church family, at the beginning of the story, I had told you a little bit about how I was going to share with grace and forgiveness. Here's where I struggle. God forgave me for my sins through the death of his son on the cross, the ultimate sacrifice, and I thank him each and every day for that gift. But I struggle with forgiving my sister. I feel like her choices have had such a profound impact on those people that I love the most in this world. I make little inroads in this area, and something happens in her and my reaction to reopen the wound. She harbors great resentment from me and often accuses me of stealing her children. And it makes it extremely hurtful comments to try and make me feel as bad as she does. I understand that she's hurting, and she's still well immersed in that life of drugs and addiction. This addiction has taken everything from her, so much so that she now lives on the streets. I know that Satan has a hand in this area and keeps reopening the wound when I am vulnerable to it. I ask that you all pray for me in this area, and definitely pray for my sister as she battles for her life. I wish that I had the courage to ask for prayers when I needed them at the beginning of this process, instead of hiding behind a false facade. I trust you, my church family, to hold me accountable in my weakness in this area. And I thank you for hearing my story.